Welcome. We have here two beautiful souls, artist and rabbi, artist and spiritual mentor, brought here. Yiska Smith is a spiritual activist, educator, mentor, and meditation guide who addresses the spiritual practice of encountering the divine spark within. In fact, Yiska views Judaism as a spiritual practice. She relies on Jewish spiritual teachings to form and uplift her students and audiences, such as a compass gently guiding them to their unique inner selves. Yael Harris Resnick is a self-taught multimedia artist known for her Pesach table runners, hand-painted silk, acrylic paintings, and for integrating silk accents on her canvases. Influenced by her mother, calligrapher and ketubah artist, Hetty Harris, much of her work involves Judaic and biblical motifs and illustrates the splendor of the land of Israel using a vibrantly colorful palette. Inspired by Jewish history, she strives to bring brave female heroines into the limelight. Without further ado, Yael Harris Resnick and Yiska Smith.
Thank you, Dvir.
Thank you, Dvir. Shalom. So, Yael, look at where we are. Yes. So when I see your beautiful piece, which is also now hanging in my home, I'm reminded of a quote, two quotes from two different Rebbes. And I think this sums up my entire teaching that I was blessed to learn with you in Chavruta. The first is from Rebbe Menachem Mendel of Kosov. He was born in 1768 and passed in 1825 in the Ukraine. He asks, why has Mashiach not come today? Simple. Because we are today just as we were yesterday. And that's much of the teaching that you and I were able to share together, having the insight, also trusting the process and realizing that we need to change our perception. We don't have to really change reality. It's how we see the reality. And you so articulated that in your painting, using the different elements, which, of course, in a moment, you'll explain to us in summary what you did. But I just sometimes stand in front of your piece and meditate on how water or fire, air, earth can be used in so many different ways. And I don't know if you recall, but when we were learning this teaching that I shared in Chavruta with Yael, I brought up the difference between Golah, which is another word for Galut, and Gu'ula. And the difference is the Aleph. The other four letters are the same, the Gimel, the Vav, the Lamed, and Hey. What the Gu'ula has is the Aleph. And the Baal Shem Tov says that's the awareness, that's the Da'at, the awareness of God, of the divine in our lives. And that changes everything. That's the difference. That's what I believe the Kosovo Rebbe is really speaking to. We need to change how we see the world so we can see more of God in the world, and that already begins the redemptive process. I'll just conclude my little part here with another quote from Rabbi Mordechai of Ger. He was the third Gerer Rebbe from 1866. He passed in 1948. He says that for the redemption to arrive, two things must happen. The Israelite people must be taken out of exile, and the exile must be taken out of the Israelite people. The latter is more difficult than the former. And this is cultivating, I see this as the invitation to cultivate the spiritual practice inwardly of becoming free, of really becoming faithful to our inner being, to our inner selves. And I think that's what I'd like to share as the summary. And now I leave it to you to discuss your piece.
Thank you, Iska. My synopsis is not as polished, but I'm the artist, so that's okay. So I think the main topic that we really wanted to bring forward, which Iska just said so eloquently, was that element of perception, that changing your perception really does change the destiny of Am Yisrael. And so within the whole piece, as a whole painting, I wanted it to be like kind of a game of perception, so that we could already begin that, like I'm basically trying to force the viewer to change their perception so that they could be a part of bringing Geula, even if they already may have done that today, but by being a part of this painting with us, you are changing the reality of Am Yisrael. So you may notice that it's a picture of a face, particularly a woman. As Dvir mentioned, I like to bring as much representation of women into art as possible. And Shmot has so many of them. So this woman represents not just Geula, but the people who helps jumpstart the Geula, starting with Shifra and Pua, and Miriam, Zipporah, and the Nashim Tzadkaniot, the virtuous women who played their drums and danced and were so part of the original Geula that we had from Yetziat Mitzrayim, and using those as inspiration for our future Geula, which is coming and is on its way and is happening right now, especially with this, beginning of changing our perception. So if you notice, there are a few little things inside the woman, and this was a whole exploration that Iska and I had, having to do with past galuyot, past exiles, and how they're a model, for us coming out of those exiles, how they were a model for our future Geula, for coming out of this exile. So we touched upon Yetziat Mitzrayim, Egypt. We touched upon the Holocaust, which was the beginning of our Galut in this generation. We touched upon the signs of our time, which are hinting to our future redemption, which in her neck, you have the kotel. We have a little snippet of the Beit HaMikdash in there. And through our original exploration of Shmot, we talked about Moshe, so he's in there a few times in different aspects. I won't go into it right now because that's very long. But we also have, I tried to hide in there the flag of Eretz Yisrael. You can see the blue of the water with the white inside, and that Aleph that Iska discussed, which is our, the difference between Galut and Geula is that Aleph, and that's the middle of our flag of Eretz Yisrael, which we have today, and is such a sign that this Geula has started. So thank you. Are there any questions? We have time.
Thank you both so much. One thing that's interesting about this piece is that each of the sensory nodes, be it the ears, the eyes, the lips, they're only presented in their form. But I'm curious if you have any, if you want to expand on how come the actual things in which we use to perceive in the world are changed?
Well, that's a very long discussion, but I can try to touch upon it a little bit. 1 second, I'm just looking at my notes. Okay, so the heads of the people there, which are also the eyes, those are, if you look very closely, I don't know if you can see it from right now, but those are locks. And the lock represents being locked in our perception, being locked in our exile. The one with Egypt, I don't know if you can zoom in. If you can, it's okay. It's unlocked because we've already experienced our redemption from there. And of course, seeing is only one way that we perceive, but it's the main first reaction of how we perceive. So I used the two exiles for the eyes because that's where we first need to change our perception. The ear is also Moshe's foot, Shal na'alecha me'al raglecha. Hashem tells Moshe to remove his shoes, and this is the whole beginning of the redemption process. So it is from that, he hears Hashem with his ears, and he uses his feet to take action. So I thought those went well together. It was a coincidence that they happened to be in the same shape, so that worked well for me. But you know, if you change your perception, you see things that you might not have seen. And then we have the nose is, it's also a sun. The forehead is the night, and the nose is the beginning of Geula. We know that from Manishtana Halayla Hazeh in the Seder, which is also part of this whole Parsha. Leilots could also mean exiles. Why is this exile different from all other exiles? So an exile is in your mind. It's a mind concept. And I don't know, something about breathing in a new perception made me connect it to Geula, the sun, the daytime, breathing in new life. So does that answer any of your questions? Is that good? Okay, thank you.
You know, if I could, I'm sorry, did someone?
No, go ahead. Yes.
This, how you just so explained the different aspects and meanings, it really brings us back to the teaching when we were learning that the Zohar, we learn in this.
Jeffrey, would you be able to mute yourself? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. That the Zohar teaches that Bereshit, which, as Devira mentioned, we're just coming out of Parshat Bereshit, is found in every Parsha in the Chumash. And where we see it in Shemot is the Gematria of Bereshit, and equals the Gematria of Shal na'alecha me'al raglecha. Now, there's a double meaning of take off your shoes from your feet, and you express that with the locks, like break the locks of your habitual behavior. And that will be the beginning. In this case, the beginning of redemption. So that's the Bereshit in Parshat Shemot, with the same gematria of Bereshit and Shal na'alecha me'al raglecha.
That's really cool.
I get really excited about something like that. Yeah.
Well, the coolest part about the Torah is that there's so many hidden puzzles and little, perceptions. And we tried to capture that as much as we could. We don't do it as well as Hashem, but we tried to find all the little things that could connect or fit inside each other. So
yeah.
Thank you for that opportunity.
And our way of interacting and engaging with Hashem comes from a place of perception, and fine-tuning our exercise machines in perception, as you have done for us, Yael, is a way for us to refine ourselves to Hashem, to notice the little things as opposed to only seeing the big picture. So this is a very beautiful piece of art, and it's also such a wonderful way to begin today's encapsulation of many different images coming together, as you've shown in your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next presentation is Yiska Smith and Mar Martinez. Mar Martinez is an interdisciplinary artist specializing in sculptural painting. Her work dissects dominance, aggression, and power dynamics through the lens of a culturally enforced binary system. Her work is informed by her Syrian and Latinx heritage and has evolved into dialogue about the exploitative nature of unchecked power imbalances. She received a BFA in painting and a BA in art history at the University of Central Florida. We have just heard from Yiska Smith, but for those who weren't able to attend the first session, Yiska is a spiritual activist, educator, mentor, and meditation guide who addresses the spiritual practice of encountering the divine spark within. In fact, Yiska views Judaism as a spiritual practice. She relies on Jewish spiritual teachings to inform and uplift her students and audiences, acting as a compass, gently guiding them to their unique inner selves. Without further ado, Yiska Smith and Mar Martinez.
Shalom again. Shalom, Mar. Hi.
Hi.
Wow. So I guess I imagine I'm supposed to go first again, so I will. This Parsha, Vayakel, it comes at a very broken time in our history. It took place the day after the first Yom Kippur. And it happened when it's really started on Shavuot, when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to receive the Torah, and he received the luchot, the tablets. He came down, and by the time he was coming down, we miscalculated. We thought he wasn't coming down, and there was that whole incident with the golden calf, and the tablets broke. And then he went right back up on the 17th of Tammuz and spent 40 days fasting and praying with God not to destroy all of the Am Yisrael, the Bnei Yisrael. So he came back down on Rosh Chodesh Elul, and that's when God said, now I will forgive, but now you're going to bring up the second set of tablets. This is going to be a collaborative effort this time. You'll bring them up and I'll inscribe them. And then he came back down 120 days after he first came up. This is the going up and down 3 times, again at the end of the third 40th day period. And the reconnection, the reconciliation through forgiveness was so strong. The bond was so much greater because now there was a collaborative effort. That light was shining out from his face, so great he had to wear a veil. Now you would think everyone would be joyous. Everyone would be so happy. Well, God forgave us. Look at Moshe Rabbeinu, is so beaming with light. And the day after Yom Kippur, the day after this occurred, is when this parsha took place. We were broken inside. Has it ever happened in your own lives? You do something and you realize, I hurt this person, not intentionally, but I hurt this person, and I regret, and I admit, and I want to ask this person for forgiveness. And the person forgives you. I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but when that's happened to me, there's that moment right after I'm forgiven, well, I'm almost disappointed because I haven't forgiven myself yet. Like, don't let me off the hook so quickly because I'm still feeling the pain of having hurt and compromised our relationship. What happened was we lost our self-confidence in our ability to live in the unity that we were experiencing at Har Sinai, with ourselves, with each other, with Hashem. And although Hashem forgave us, we wondered how long it would be before we forgave ourselves. So what did Moshe do to help us repair, return, and restore? Without being commanded by God, he gathered us together. He brought us together in a kehillah. And he did this in order to restore our unity. He didn't just speak to a few of the elderly, like the 70 elders. He got us all together and he talked about Shabbat. He talked about Truma, about building a Mishkan. These are two. One is in time, Shabbat. One is in space, the Mishkan, that brings us together. We come together on Shabbat because we're not emphasizing our unique qualities to create. Rather, we're sitting together and bathing, so to speak, in the splendor, just immersed in the splendor of the one creator. And with the Mishkan, we're all bringing different trumot to bring one Mishkan, one holy, sacred edifice, building that will be the home for the Shekhinah. And it was so unified that it even looked like only one person built it, according to the Midrash. So this parsha is about healing brokenness and restoring unity. We were nishba, we were mashabah, and we didn't sense that achdut. So in gathering us together, Moshe conveyed that we made the golden calf because we weren't sensing our own unity. So now let's make something that will help us cultivate the practice of achdut, of unity. So he gathered all of us together. He spoke to us together in community to realistically convey that the first and foremost important thing we do is to be united. And when we become united in time, and when we become united in space, that's when we sense the presence of the divine, which is what happens on Shabbat and which is what happens in the Mishkan, later to then evolve into the Beit HaMikdash. And each one of us has a Mikdash Ma'at within ourselves. As it says in the Gemara, that when the temple was destroyed, the Shekhinah went into Galut with each of us. So this invites us to build our own Mishkan within mind, body, heart, soul, bringing all the different parts of us that could be separate, that could be vying for attention and competing for each other, instead to bring them together in harmony, in achdut. And that only strengthens rather than weakens the integrity of this connection. So that's, I believe, as we say, al regel achat, on one foot, so to speak, the summary of what I shared with you, Mar, in our wonderful Chavruta sessions. So I turn it over to you to help us see the beauty of your creating healing and restoring unity.
Yeah, well, thank you, Yishka, for sharing. Like, I had a wonderful time working with you and Dear. I appreciate that you started this initiative to get people working collaboratively, because a lot of artists, I think, they hole up and there's not a lot of interference from the outside world, but being able to work with someone that's educated and knowledgeable and getting to think conceptually, it became like a platform to work on something that's a little outside of my own comfort zone. Typically I'm a painter, and getting to work and sit in a way like rooted in language had me thinking a little bit outside the box. And in response to Yishka's teachings, I had wanted to do something a little bit more sculptural. So I created a type of tzedek box inspired by her teachings. And I saw clear parallels from the community coming together to create like the Mishkan, and I aim to create a functional but also conceptually based ritual object in response to the Torah portion. So I used a mixture of contemporary techniques like laser cutting and paired it with archaic materials such as gold leaf to kind of reference the way that ritual is significant and how it plays a role that can be implemented in modernity, especially since there was a theme of coming together and finding a unity, especially through the idea of Shabbat. Like there are ways that we take the teaching of the past and make them relevant to today. So it's not something that has like an expiration date. So I thought that the merging of these two approaches was appropriate for what we talked about. And the work that I made, it's created with concentric circles, which it's a way of referencing unity and togetherness from a formal structure. And the gold leaf, it references when the Mishkan and the ideas of creating a space for Shaynash to rest. So we're like, that was spread through each of us, and we have an ability to kind of be a vessel, not only to hold that like love and that joy and that forgiveness, but then also as a community, we function as a vessel. And there's these open areas of space for light to kind of emanate out. And these concentric circles are also supported on these posts, which I think can symbolize the way that we have the ability to kind of support each other through this togetherness. And we rely on a balance within ourselves as well as our outer whole to be able to function well as a society that can care for others while finding like a wholeness within ourselves through these through this like philosophy. So in the divine presence will only reveal itself when we're united, which connects to the concept of the tzedek box. So there's this idea of charity and community care that is really important. And we invite the Mishkan through care through our community, and we're able to achieve this through unity. So by coming together and uniting through our differences, I think that the unity we can create as a whole is greater than the sum of its disparate parts. So, and I think the very first time we spoke, we talked a lot about the idea of like the light of the Shabbat candles emanating out. And that was something that really stuck with me. So the like transparentness of this structure, it's able to not only capture, but kind of reflect light out of it. And you also see how the negative space is just as important for defining this object as the positive space. So the air and the energy can kind of flow through it. And then the shadows also reference like the way that this piece, like depending on how it's lit, it can expand to take up massive amounts of space. So that's kind of what I had in mind when I was going about this. Like, I hope I did you proud, Yishka, because I really felt like I went well this time.
Oh, I hope I did you proud. Dvir, thank you. Thank you for creating this opportunity for me as a educator, as a aspiring scholar, can work with an artist. I can actually share some of my teachings. And actually, this teaching was based on a teaching from Reb Shalom Brat, Zichrono Livracha, here in Yerushalayim. And he's up in Gan Eden now, probably receiving so much nachat from you, Mar. He was one of my most important teachers. And that we've been able, I've never worked before with an artist like this. I mean, this is, to quote Heschel, this is radically amazing. And this brings the achdut, this brings the healing of the brokenness. So thank you, Mar, so much. And Dvir for allowing us to work together like this. Kol hakavod. Tizkele mitzvot lagamrei.
Yiska, I'm curious if you have any feelings about these concentric circles and what that means in the project of building the Mishkan. What symbolisms do these concentric circles bring out in you?
What it brings out in me, which is different and actually opposite the midrash that I quoted about the Mishkan, is I see diversity. I see unity in diversity, dafka, because they're not the same. But as Mar pointed out, they're held together. They're bonded together through these posts. And that would be our belief in the divine, holding by the Torah. I find the differences, I see the circles as being unique. Each one's different. Each one's is its own, and yet it connects. It connects through its own piece. That's how I see it. So,
thank you. Thank you. As we continue into these conversations, we're going to enter into a new one that also deals with the spiraling circles, the divine bodies above spiral around us, and to see kind of this spiraling within us that Yiska and Mara have explored, the open air that's the space in between, but the circling energy of the Vayakhel, of bringing us together, creates both diversity to be different and an aspiration to come together. So the next presentation we have is none other than Rabbi Alicia Magal and Yael Kanarek. Yael Kanarek is an established Israeli-American multidisciplinary artist, a student of Kabbalah. Since 2016, she's been working on regendering the Bible in response to the critical void of canonical text in Lashon Isha. On Simchat Torah in 2020, she established what was Beit Torah for the ritual and study of a regendered Torah. Rabbi Alicia Magal, her partner and co-collaborator, spent 7 years in Israel working at the Israel Broadcasting Authority national television station and as a licensed tour guide for adult and youth groups. She met her husband Yitzchak in Israel on Kibbutz Magan Michael during her work, Magen Michael, during her work study in an Ulpan program. They spent several years living in Jerusalem, and when their 2 children were small, they moved to Los Angeles, where Alicia continued her work in the Jewish community. Before we hear from Yael Kanarek, we have a voice from above. We have Alicia Magal's opening statement.
Shalom, everyone at the Amen Institute.
Is everyone able to hear that? Or yes? Okay, great. We will start again.
Shalom, everyone at the Amen Institute. What a joy this year, working first with Yael Kanarek and learning all about the regendered Torah, Beit Torah Ta, opened my eyes to a whole new way of reading, listening, looking at the Torah. And then amazing work with Siona Benjamin on Miriam and Zipporah and the idea of what is an Isha Kushit, the whole idea of who we are, our identity as Jews, and that it's so much wider than Ashkenazi Jews know and think. So I loved this year working together with artists and bringing my rabbinic learning and teaching, but opening wider than I ever thought because of the partnerships. So thank you, Dvir, and everyone involved. Thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you, but I'm sending you this message. Shalom. Hope to do another project. Open to it. Bye-bye. Shalom.
Hi everyone. My name is Yael. Thank you, Dvir, for this incredible initiative. I want to talk a little bit, I'll say a few words about the Regendered Bible and how it actually comes to be. So the process of creating the Regendered Bible is rewriting the Bible as we know it, reversing the genders of all the characters. So all the female characters become male characters and all the male characters become female characters. The God becomes a goddess. The name is Elohim, Tehovah Elohim. And so the Parashat Miketz that we worked on is refers to the story of the dream of Now Parah. Par'a is what we know from Torato, Pharaoh. Par'a has a dream and things roll. Tosef, what was Yosef? Tosef is pulled out of the dungeon and Par'a asks her to solve the dream. And there's an interesting thing that Tosef says to Par'a. And she says to her, Biladai, without me. It's not me who is speaking to you. I'm removing my ego out of this, and what you'll be hearing is what Elohim wants you to hear. The answer is not from me, the answer is from Elohim. So I thought this was a really interesting moment to, it's almost a kind of script of how Tosef, who is in a less powerful position in relation to Par'a, is positioning herself to be able to answer her. So either two things are suggested here. One is to answer to Par'a, I need to remove myself as Tosef, that particular person, and operate as a channel for Teva's message. Or the other thing, and I don't think it's or, I think it's both of these things are happening at the same time, for Tosef to have the power to stand in front of the Par'a, she needs to engage Elohim. She needs to have a higher power than Par'a in order to be able to stand up to her and for Par'a to hear her. So I think these two things are really interesting that they're happening here. So what I did is I centered that in the middle of the composition. And what is around it is the various conversation and the result of what happened is in response to that particular interaction. And I'll read to you some of the language. So one of the Par'a says, in my dream, I stand on the banks of the Te'or. Ye'or became Te'or. Ye is the future sound, the future tense in male. Or is light. Te would be the future tense for female. So Te'or, future light, generated from a female side. So what I really like about this phrase, and I'll read it to you in Hebrew from our website, ותדבר פרעה אל תוסף, בחלומי הנני עומדת על שפת התיאור. And a midrash on that particular line can be translated as and Par'a spoke to Tosef, in my dream, I stand on the language of future light. Sfat, safa is banks, but it also means language. It also means lip, te'or, future light. So this is an example of what is possible, the kind of new reading that becomes possible in Torah. A few other lines that we never hear in the female form in Torah. And Par'a said to her maids and servants, can we find a woman like this, who the spirit of Elohim dwells within her? Verse 39, and Par'a said to Tosef, because Elohim has shown you all this, there is no one as sharp and wise as you. And the last verse I'll read to you, verse 43, and she had her ride in a second chariot, which belonged to her, and they called before her soft mother, Emraka, and she placed her all over the land of Mitzrayim. So Egypt is Mitzrayim in Hebrew. So from Mitzrayim, we arrived from Mitzrayim to Mitzrayim, those who create a narrow place. So now it's women who create a narrow place, or women who are sorrowful. So so that's a little bit of Torah and the kind of work that evolved in the conversation between Alicia, Rabbi Magal, and myself. Anybody has any questions? Could be general questions about Torah, her Torah.
In your studies with Rabbi Alicia Magal, there was a particular moment that you both shared with one another when the text washed over Rabbi Magal and she saw it with new eyes. Would you care to share us about that moment?
I don't remember exactly which moment in the text is. I think it had to do with when Tosef meets her sisters. And I don't want to do injustice to Rabbi Magal's experience, but there was a moment that she was welling up, and I think what she was saying was that she never, imagining this as a conversation between sisters was a completely new experience of the text for her. I think that's what she said. I don't want to do her injustice. For me, I can tell you that reading Torah in this way, suddenly I'm placed so much closer to the power and the mechanisms that are written into Torah, that are otherwise are too far removed from me. They become too abstract. And this removes that space. When I read, so I'm fluent in Hebrew, and when I read something like, "Vatomer par'a el Tosef acharei hodi'a Elohim notach et kol asher en nevona v'chachama kamoch." There's no one, to a woman she's saying, a woman saying to a woman, there's no one who's wise and smart as you are. This is language that we're not really used to hearing. And what we're hoping that Torah will do is, first of all, open a much wider range of emotion and feeling available in women's language. And when we bring the two sides together, we bring Torah and Torah together, we open a much, much bigger possibilities of what Torah can be. And we are opening, we're opening the landscape for a reciprocal theology, not a theology that is based on the subjugation of women to men. This is what Torah is. It's a blueprint of power, and this happens immediately, right from the get-go. But now when we have the subjugation, yes, it's not ideal in terms of language, but the subjugation of men to women, which is also true, then we can actually create between the two of those, bringing those two together, so we can start thinking in reciprocal terms that seem a lot more authentic, at least to me.
Mike Wirth takes note of that Mike loves the dynamic typography baselines, making the text dance and live in a whole new way, like a ripple in the water. Do you have any thoughts about the typography and the shape of this piece in particular?
So you can see I highlighted in pink the places in the text that are speaking specifically about qualities of, here it's qualities of Tosef. Tosef means she will add. Yosef means he will add. Par'a means she destructed. I wanted to create a sense of like the nugget of the event in the middle and the kind of ripple effect that happens as a result of this interaction. So, and what I centered is the word bilada. You can see that it's in the color of the background. What you see, I actually exercise the idea of the ego of the letters. And what you see is the shadow of the words without me is defined by the shadow in the back, to kind of lift it up and to suggest that that as a kind of script of, when dealing with a situation like that we're on the line, putting our ego, going into this without ego has a potential of creating a better outcome or a more authentic outcome. And I wanted to convey that as a process, convey that as almost like a script for behavior, which is how I like to read Torah anyway. A set, like little nuggets of instruction of how to deal, what happens in particular situations. Mm-hmm. I like also that Par'a gave Tosef a new name, Tzafnat Panchi, the one who cracks the code. Tzofen means code, Panchi means to crack, to solve the code. So that's the new name of Tosef, the one who cracks the code. And another thing that we did, which I thought was really exciting and cool, is in Torato, his Torah, when Paro puts Yosef sends him around and parades him basically. He's called Avrech. They're calling Avrech, Avrech, Avrech. The word Avrech, its meaning is unclear, it's unknown. But from Avrech, we deduct Avrach, a soft father. And that's what we brought into Torata, Emraka. What they're calling Tosef, Emraka, soft mother, soft mother, soft mother. And these are the kind of readings that we can pull out and build. And so what Torata allows us is to create a new language of commentary and midrash and story that is based in mother-daughter lineage, goddess mother-daughter lineage. Same stories, but now they're going through the mother-daughter lineage. Womb, birthing, womb, birthing, womb, birthing, womb.
And in many ways, your participation in this project has allowed you to become a code cracker in your own right. So thank you very much for bringing this new insight. And what we see in this conversation is to bring out language that we otherwise wouldn't have seen. In our next presentation, Siona Benjamin explores seeing and lifting the voice of people who also who aren't able to defend themselves. We hear the story of the Isha Kushit from Parshat Bahalotcha. But first, let me introduce Siona Benjamin in her own right. Siona Benjamin's unique perspective as an Indian-American Jewish artist has inspired her to create art that represents her transcultural and multicultural narrative. Often featuring blue characters, Siona's work illuminates vibrant colors, cultural and religious symbols in various mediums to create works that have synergy and meaning. Her art has been shown in galleries, museums, and sacred spaces around the world. She was awarded 2 prestigious Fulbright Fellowships to explore the theme of a multicultural art in both Israel and India. She creates art installations, art commissions, and artworks for private and public spaces. As an artist and speaker, she shares her personal journey through live speaking engagements. For those who didn't hear about Rabbi Elisha Magal, Rabbi Elisha Magal spent 7 years in Israel working at the Israel Broadcasting Authority before transitioning into a second career as an artist. She worked in the Skirball, as a rabbi, she worked in the Skirball Museum in Los Angeles as program director for Temple Emmanuel, a large Reform synagogue in Beverly Hills, and is currently a rabbi in Sedona Valley in Arizona. We have an opening statement from Elisha Magal, and then we'll enter into Siona's presentation.
Shalom, everyone at the Amen Institute. What a joy this year, working first with Yael Kanarek and learning all about the regendered Torah, Beit Torata, opened my eyes to a whole new way of reading, listening, looking at the Torah. And then amazing work with Siona Benjamin on
We can't hear. It's on mute.
wider than
Is
I
that
ever
better?
thought because of.
Did that work?
It's very low.
Oh.
Wider.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jews know and think. So I love this year working together with artists and bringing my rabbinic learning and teaching, but opening wider than I ever thought because of the partnerships. So thank you, Dvir, and everyone involved. Thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you, but I'm sending you this message. Shalom. Hope to do another project. Open to it. Bye-bye. Shalom.
As Rabbi Elisha Magal expressed, Ziona Benjamin and her, they both explored Parshat Bahalotcha and the story, an inner narrative between Tzipora and Miriam. And Tzipora is identified by the color of her skin. And this moment in reading the text through the lens of seeing her skin as exceptionalized or fetishized, or whichever way it's brought out by the rabbis, Ziona explored it with curiosity. And I'd like to introduce Ziona to share some words about the process.
Shalom. Thank you, Dvir, and thanks to the Iman Institute for a wonderful year of meeting other artists and studying with Rabbi Alicia, who was wonderful to study with. I was just wondering, could I share my screen, Dvir?
We're not able to share screen, but do you want to show the video first, or start with this image?
Okay, that's fine. I had made a small presentation, but I wasn't aware that you couldn't share the screen. It's totally fine. We can improvise. So in this piece, the kind of rough statement for this is Tzipora is under the gaze of Miriam. Tzipora is not shy or ashamed of who she is, but she is modest and has self-confidence within her, and therefore she does not meet the gaze, but looks introspectively inward into her own self. She is absorbed within. Miriam is the leader and is an extrovert and probes into things. There is a little of both in all of us. Tzipora's turban is red, white, and blue colors, the colors reflecting the future of her people. Many moons later, some of her people will be slaves in the new world. They will be freed later, but will carry the load in their souls. So the reason why we went this direction, so to speak, is because we read about topics like the Eruv people. Eruv which means the edge of the community. Eruv people kind of feeds into the stereotypes of Jews of color. And also this is not by choice, but sometimes it is sort of brought upon us. Like today I was actually speaking to a Yemenite friend of mine in Israel, and he said to me he was speaking to somebody, this is just very current, and his name is Ozeri, and the Ashkenazi Jew told him, what kind of Jewish name is that? So just this kind of the lack of knowledge of the other is what intrigued me in this piece. And the fact that Tzipora was a Midianite, she came from the Midian tribe. And even then, Miriam was also sort of, because she spoke up in this piece, and voiced her opinion, so did Aaron, but nothing happens to Moses or Aaron, but Miriam is sent also to the edge to cure her skin leprosy. The Lashon Hara, the ill speech that she supposedly performed, gave her a punishment too. So there's again the case of the woman being sent to the edge, and also Tzipora. There's many interpretations. There are interpretations where Miriam was siding with Tzipora and told Moses that you do not pay more attention to your wife. But then there is also the other part where we found intriguing when we were studying that there is the Isha Kushit is mentioned many times, and why that is necessary, we were wondering as to why that was necessary to mention time and time again. And then, of course, I came across the song by my friend Galit Dardashti, who has written a Persian song which is influenced by a Ladino song called Shekhar Khoret. The words are something like, "The dark one they call me, but my skin was white. Only the summer sun made my complexion dark. Oh, dark one, he calls me the prince. He calls me once again. I shall follow him." So these are the words of the song from an ancient Ladino song, which is then sung by Galit Dardashti, and I use that music. I don't know if we have time to play part of the video or not. It's up to you. It just
Yes,
play
yes.
part of it, and I can tell you when to stop.
Sure. Let me know about the audio.
No audio. There is no audio.
You have to share sound before you share screen. When you go in there on the bottom left, there's a share sound, should be button.
Thank you. We have enough time for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't know if we have enough time for the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If anyone has any questions, if not, I'll ask Sienna. Oh, yes, Simon.
Hi, thank you so much. I remember your chavruta, and it was so beautiful to just see the connection between you two and how much both of your work grows through that relationship. I didn't notice before, but I noticed it this time, that Miriam finds herself in what I think from your artwork is Vashti's house, where she's looking through the looking glass. And I just love how your other work finds itself in this video. And if I remember correctly, there was a student who also worked, who also identifies, I think, as a Jew of color, and was
she was just African American.
Oh, I see.
I had a Latino student and an African American intern that semester when I was working on this.
Right.
And so they worked on it. Yeah. And so it was really meaningful. I'm sorry to interrupt your question.
No, please.
It was meaningful for them also to understand, to learn about, Tzipora being the dark one, and what is the meaning of Isha Kushit, and how we tied it into, sort of race relations, and, an ongoing topic which through the centuries has been in focus. But I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, I loved seeing more of your characters and more of your pieces find its way into this video. I didn't remember that. So it's so spectacular.
Thank you. Yeah, I use a lot of I have a big vocabulary of images and work, so I can sort of look into the bag of images and sort of, I do many collages like that from past work and mix and match, so that's what I did.
Well, thank you, Siona, for embarking on this textual. It's so rich in intertextual conversations, but more importantly, not only did you bring those texts into conversation with one another, but you brought your own soul out into this and really read deeply with a fine lens, read into your own life experience and brought it to this text. Made it that much more meaningful for me to read Parshat Bahalatcha this year, and for many years, for the rest of my life probably, I won't read it with quite the same way. Our next presentation is a presentation with Toby Kahn and Rabbi Yisachar Katz. Both of them explored the probing questions of the temple procedures, the temple sacrifices. I'll let them explain their presentation for themselves, but first we have Toby Kahn, who's a painter and sculptor whose work has been shown in over 40 solo exhibitions and over 60 museums group shows since he was selected as one of 9 artists to be included in the 1985 Guggenheim Museum exhibition, New Horizons in American Art. Works by Kahn are in major museums, corporate and private collections. Rabbi Yisachar Katz received ordination in 1986 from Rabbi Yecheskel Roth, Dayan of UTA Satmar. Rabbi Katz studied in Brisk and in Yeshivat Beit Yosef Nevardok for over 10 years. A graduate of the Hashar program for Jewish educators, Rabbi Katz has taught at the Mayonot Yeshiva High School for girls and SAR High School. He was a leading teacher of Daf Yomi class in Borough Park for over 8 years, and he was also the rabbi of the Prospect Heights Shul in Brooklyn, and currently the Talmud department chair at Yeshivat Chovevei Torah. Rabbi Yisachar Katz and Toby Kahn, without further ado, the stage is yours.
Well, Yisachar, you're a rabbi, so you go first. Even though we're both Kohanim, and I love duchening with you on Yom Tov, you are a rabbi, so you do go first. So you
can. Now I'm just going to do a short, brief introduction and then let you speak. I think that it's more important to hear about your work. I'm just going to speak in general because I was fortunate enough to have 2 artists, both of whom worked on Parshiyot in the book of Leviticus and the book of Vayikra. And I would think that for many people, being stuck with the study of sacrifices and the study of the temple wouldn't be necessarily such an exciting thing. As it happens, I happen to love the study of sacrifices. I am a Kohen, that's true, but I love the study of sacrifices, not necessarily because I'm looking forward to the day when I can slaughter animals, but more importantly, because I think that we missed the point of what the temple was and what sacrifices were by getting stuck and bogged down by focusing on the actual slaughtering piece of all of that. Because to me, the slaughtering is really the smallest piece of what the temple is all about. In fact, I like to say, and I believe it, that in some ways, a temple Jew was an extremely psychologically aware Jew, because without getting into the details, there is a very specific breakdown of sacrifices. You know, when you do a sin, there is 2 or 3 types of korbanot that you bring for sin offerings. Then there are thanks offerings, which also have 2 or 3 types. And the ability to live a life where you're aware of the nuances of, oh, this was this kind of transgression, this was that kind of transgression, or I'm this kind of thankful versus that kind of thankful, or I'm this happy or that joyous. That kind of, cultivates a very robust psychological awareness of your spiritual temperature, so to speak. So, whether we have the korbanot or not, the idea that you woke up every morning knowing, did I do a chatat, which is the name of one of korbanot transgression, or did I do asham transgression, kind of cultivates and inculcates a certain kind of spiritual and religious awareness, which I think was incredible. That's number one. And the last thing I'm going to say before I give the floor to Toby is that I deeply, deeply believe that we confuse the means and the end when we study sacrifices. We normally think of the temple as the means, the kind of home where we brought the sacrifices. So it was just kind of a home, a structure, an edifice where we were able to bring the korbanot. I think it's the other way around. I think the purpose was the edifice. If you think of the parshiot preceding Vayikra, the Torah goes into such nitty-gritty detail about the building of the Beit HaMikdash, and it's also quite ostentatious and beautiful and elaborate. And then when we get to Shlomo, Shlomo adds to the art of the Beit HaMikdash. I think the Beit HaMikdash was a proto-museum where people came to be taken into that space where aesthetics takes us, right? Aesthetics takes us into a kind of zone where we are not on a daily basis, where we're not on a regular basis. And that's what we go to for museums. We go to a museum to kind of take us into that transcendent place. And I think the korbanot were merely a means to bring us to the temple so that we can bask in the beauty and the aesthetics of the temple and then go into those spaces that art takes us into. So I really appreciate Dvir giving me the opportunity to work with 2 incredible artists, Toby, and then we'll talk later about Jeffrey also, and both of whom allowed me to further explore temple sacrifices and korbanot. So Toby, take it away.
Well, first of all, it was an honor to work with you, and Dvir, thank you for making that connection. I agree with most of what you said, which is
that's a lot.
That's a lot, but there are certain things I don't. But let me talk about what you said first that I loved. So anyone who knows my work, I've been creating sacred spaces since I was in undergraduate school at Hunter College in the 70s. And I did my first piece. In fact, that's how I got a full scholarship to Pratt Graduate School. I made an installation called Poles for the Dwelling. And it was based on the outside section of, right outside the Kadosh Kadoshim, of how the poles came together. And I also did a huge installation. And if anyone sees the film, there's a short film that the filmmaker Susan Dreyfus did 2 years ago. And you'll see me in my studio with this huge art piece that I was working on. And that was a Mizbeach. And it was, it was much bigger than I was. And it covered my entire studio. And people say, do you still have it? And I said, I couldn't have paid for the storage. And I had to take it apart and use the elements for other pieces that I made later. But I do agree with you 1,000%. when people say to me, "You're Jewish, and how come your Judaism is so much about aesthetics?" And I say, what other religion? I do love the Sistine Chapel. You know, I do like the ceiling. I have different things to say about everything, but thinking about what the Kruvim look like and thinking about what the Mizbeach was like and how you held the Aron Kodesh, and even you held an Aron Kodesh that had the broken luchos in it. To me, if you read the New York Times, which I do read, I know some people don't, but I still read it and I'm fascinated. There was a few weeks ago, they talk about how Cycladic art is becoming a huge influence. And in fact, the Met has made an agreement with Greece to have some of those pieces on display. And when I started teaching at the Mesivta when I was in my 20s, I always would start my lectures at the Met in the Cycladic room, because I talked about the fact that those little sculptures that was the same time as, it's over 5,000 years ago, and it was very similar to what we were doing as a people at the same time. So Yisachar, I love that you mentioned that going to the temple was like going to a museum. The only thing I don't agree with that is I think it's more like a sacred space. And I like that the elements in the Mishkan were elements. It was not separate from the experience. It was the experience. And when you go to a museum, it's usually artifacts in a building rather than part of the building. And that's why I love, I always think to myself, when we talk about who Betzalel was, and Betzalel means in the shadow of God, that to me is like, oh my God, I love that. I mean, I never wanted to be Moshe or Aaron or Miriam. I would love, if I had to pick a character in the Torah, the idea of talking about aesthetics with God, like, oh, you can't beat that. So thank you for bringing that up. As far as Korbanot goes, I said that when you and I did the program together that day, that I really want to think about who the Korbanot, I want to think about the animals that gave of themselves so that, we could be cleansed. I want to talk about the plants that gave of themselves. And I want to look at everything, not from a human point of view, but from the sacrifices themselves. So if anyone wants to come, I have a solo museum show opening in Long Island on November 20th. It's the Museum of Modern Art in Patchogue, Long Island. And this first image, in fact, it's the cover of the catalog. I don't know if you can even see any of it. It's the cover. And all the paintings in the show are in that museum show. So let me quickly go through the images, and then I'd love to hear from all of you. So when I thought about plants being burned to go up to God, I thought, wouldn't it be beautiful to see the individual leaves and the individual pieces as they go towards heaven? And I think of blue as Shemayim. I also think of it as water, but I felt like these were dancing nature going towards heaven. So let me go through these quickly, because I know we only have 15 minutes and I don't want to ever take anyone else's time. And I think I'm already going quickly. So this was another one. I thought about the, when the Kohanim had to, get rid of all the flesh, and then there were bones left. And I wanted to think about all the elements of the animals and how we have to give respect to those remainders of the animal, not the meat. Let's go to the next one. And this one, I think, Yisachar, this was your favorite, and I was thrilled that you found one that related to you. And this was like the blood of the, I love what you said, Yisachar. I don't know if you still remember what you said, but I'd rather you say it than me say it, because I love what you said, or you want me to talk?
Go ahead, Dopey. Toby, go ahead.
All right. So you talked about the fact that red was so, it felt very blood-like. And I thought about, when you, if you know about plants, and there was just a beautiful study written about how we need bees in the world today so that we can have honey and what honey does for everything. And now all plants, the areas that the bees come to have to be beautiful and fragrant and all that. So the bees come to cross-pollinate. And I was looking at these plants that had these stamens and pistons and I wanted them to be very alive and feel the intensity of their lives. Even though I do know plants are not people or animals, I wanted to have that feeling in there. We can go to the next one.
Those are the three.
Oh, that's the only three we picked. We didn't, because on the cover you had the three animal ones together. I love that you had picked that one. Oh, I didn't realize. So there was one that for our session, you showed these three gold pieces. So then I can, I'd love to hear from all of you of what you think. I mean, we have another 3.5 minutes. I'd really like to hear if anyone has any questions or statements. In fact, we don't even have 3 minutes, but does anyone have any questions or anything?
As I've been following your work, Toby, and I saw that you published with Alicia Kaplan last year.
Yes.
Appropriately titled Karbanot, offerings, in which you have a plethora of works depicting the notion of offering or sacrificing.
Right.
So you seem to be on a very Kohanic role here.
So I've been interested in this for over 30 years. And it was very amazing to work with a poet and hear how she and I come from very similar backgrounds, but have moved our lives in different directions. Yes, so I've done over 100 images based on Karbanot over the last 30 years. When I worked with Yisachar, these are all new pieces that I did, and I was looking at one parsha. But yes, I'm happy that you brought up that book. It was a great joy to work on a book like that.
And certainly there's something so floral about this bloodletting in this image, and maybe that is the whole point of the certain transmuting the gory blood into something beautiful.
By the way, that is what Yisachar said, and that's so thank you for saying that. But I really, that is how I felt this piece was. I wanted that beauty, but it also would feel very life-giving. But it looks like it's dancing. And someone asked me when they came to the studio, they said, "Did you think about Matisse when you were doing that?" And I said, "I think about everyone when I do anything." But once they said that, I remember the cutouts of Matisse late in his life. And I like the way the pieces separated from the front and the background. So all the paintings I do start as works on paper, and then they become smaller paintings. And now this is quite a large painting, and it's amazing to look at it, after a few months when Yisachar and I were talking about it. Anyway, Dvir, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part of this amazing program that you're doing, and looking at the Torah through artists' eyes with rabbis, I think is a gift to everyone. And I really want to thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Toby. Thank you, Rabbi Yisachar. The way your conversation flowed into bringing about all of these images, it was almost like a stream of each image brought out tons of Torah, and each Torah idea brought out so many interesting images. If this image in particular will really transition us into the next presentation, where Jeffrey talks about and explores the relationship and dynamic between us in the generation following the Holocaust, our relationship with our ancestors. This image, when I see it, I see the smoke from one side and the shadow soul in the other side, and the question and dynamic between us and the shadow of the Holocaust, and those lives that we lost in the fire of the smoke. What is our dynamic in that, and how do we come together in this moment of sacrifice in Korbanot? So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Rabbi Yisachar Katz and Jeffrey Lawrence. A reminder to anyone who is unmuted, just to stay muted so we can hear the presenters crystal clear. Jeffrey Lawrence is an American realist painter He lives and works in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Born in Paterson, New Jersey, child of Holocaust survivors, he was brought up and educated in London, England. He attended the Byam Shaw School of Art, LCAD, painting, London College of Printing, New York Academy of Art, exhibited USA and Europe, Las Vegas Museum, and all over the world. We also have here Rabbi Yisachar Katz, for those who weren't present for the—
No need to go over my bio. It's fine.
Okay.
That's right.
So without further ado, Rabbi Yisachar, could you give us a little insight into this image?
Yeah, so I'm going to really speak just for 1 minute because I feel that Jeffrey has a tremendous amount to say. Something that was very unique about working with Jeffrey is that it was the first time that I had the privilege of being exposed to the process of making art, not just to the final product. And I never appreciated the depth and the Torah, really, the learning that goes into being privy to the process of making art. And I, again, find that the timing and the coordination of the Parsha was incredible, because Parshat Achrei Mot, for those of you who know, a big part of Parshat Achrei Mot talks about the process of the Avodah in the Beit HaMikdash in Yom HaKippurim. And there, actually, the entire discussion is about process. You should do A, which was followed by B, which was followed by C. And at least according to rabbinic tradition, if you mess up the process, the entire enterprise, the entire edifice falls apart. So, you know, when we go to a museum, when we go to a art show, when we go to a gallery, we see the final product, and there's something to be learned from the final product, but we must never have the opportunity or the privilege to see how the product came about and what went into that process. I would love for Jeffrey to share a little bit of what I've learned over this year of working with Jeffrey, and mostly just observing how Jeffrey develops the piece, and also the thought and the energy and the depth that goes into putting together a piece until it is done. And I think I'm going to jump the gun by telling you that one of the many things I learned from Jeffrey is that the word done on a piece of art is an oxymoron. A piece of art, at least from Jeffrey's perspective, is never done. So Jeffrey, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank Dvir and Yisachar so much for giving me the opportunity to be involved in this project. Unlike most of the people involved in the project, I wasn't brought up as a Jew. In fact, my Judaism was denied to me quite fervently, and it became the elephant in the room, and I only had it really acknowledged, you know, much, much later in life. So for me to be involved in a project to do with an Orthodox community, that was serious rebellion. And I was telling Yisachar that when I did the Passover ceremony by myself on East 2nd Street in New York, and followed the directions on my own for the first time, I wasn't sure if there was going to be a bolt of lightning come through the window. So, you know, I took the project very seriously, and being given the inheritance I had, I think all of my work has been influenced by the Holocaust in some way or other. And I've worked on different questions that I had about the Holocaust that I painted about. I mean, my painting was therapy for me, and still is. And so, yes, this is still a part of the series that I've made over the last 20 years, but well, not 20 years, 18 years. But at the same time, I felt very much the subject of atonement has revolved around my head for years, because I don't know if atonement is possible. And working through the year and talking to Yisachar about atonement, I explored this idea of of, is it possible, as a question, how do you atone for 6 million dead Jews? How do you atone for that? How do you atone for all of the other atrocities? I don't think it's possible. As I said in the other presentation, I think you can achieve acceptance, and I think you can achieve forgiveness, but atonement, I'm not sure. And I mean, I don't even know if you can atone for the argument you had with your sister or your mother or whoever. I think that was the basis of my entry into this. And I don't speak Hebrew, so I couldn't understand the language of the piece, but Dvir very kindly sent me a translation. And I approached it as part of my Holocaust series. Can we have the progression slides? So I started off with a drawing. My process, as Saskia says, the paintings are never finished. They're just part of the process of thinking about something. And I started off making a drawing, or actually making several drawings, and I ended up choosing this one as the basis of what I was going to do. And originally, I had thought about being literal to the text and having blood on the hands. But I made the temple Auschwitz in the background. And the goats obviously symbolize us. So next slide. So here's the beginning of the painting. I paint in layers, which, as you know, it fits in with my idea of painting being a process that's never finished. I don't believe in final images. I think that a lot of the great paintings of the world simply stopped where they stopped, and the artists would have gone on to change them. So next slide. So here we have a more finished underpainting in just black and white. Next slide. And then I start thinking about the middle layer, which is just two colors, warm and cold. And I put a warm glaze over, because my thinking was to make this very much about a question going upwards towards Yahweh, not focusing on a total environment, but to have a specific light that is hitting Aaron. Next slide. And so here we have a progression of the warm, cool stage. This is just two colors in white. And you can see that I've started putting Auschwitz in the background quite clearly. And, you know, I wanted to put that Arbeit macht frei in because it represented the cruelty that went with the sacrifice. The ironic and horrific cruelty of putting that there. So, but at this point, I realized that I did not want Auschwitz to be so prominent. And I talked to Isoska about it at the time. Next slide. So here I'm approaching the final stage. I mean, we've missed a few, I think, but the full color stage, where I use whatever colors I feel are necessary. And as you can see, I obscured Auschwitz in the back there because I felt, first of all, that I wanted it to appear as if you're arriving there at night, but also I didn't want it to be such a focus. And this is where it stopped. I mean, I'm letting the painting dry. I'll probably fiddle with it again. I'm not happy with the smoke of the incense. But the smoke obviously represents what it represents, but I feel that it ought to be a sort of slightly dirty and gray color. Anyway, it's interesting that Toby chose to do an image with smoke in white too. Because the smoke to me is such an icon of our experience in the 20th century. Most of my family went up in smoke. So, and I was brought up with very few relatives, but I was also, it was made into a subject that must not be explored. So through the exploration, exploration and the explanations from Isoska, I mean, I can't thank Dvir enough for putting me together with Isoska, because in our own ways, we're both rebels. Rebels in a personal sense, as well as rebels to the current conservative beliefs. So that really gave me a feeling that I was doing the right thing. And what's interesting for me is that I can't remember which stage, but I think it was after I painted the underpainting, I had this incredible feeling that it wasn't me painting it, that this thing had come together really in a mystical way. So, and now after a year of working on it, it's taken me a year. I didn't work all of the time on it at the beginning. I was a bit of a slacker, which I am usually. So I didn't really get into it until about the third month. But then I seriously got into it, and I've spent many, many hours on it. So there it is.
I have a couple of questions. Is that possible?
Sure.
Yeah, I just was wondering, is this a self-portrait?
It was, and the reason that it was a self-portrait was not intentional, but as I explained to Dvir and Isoska, I actually couldn't find a Jewish-looking model in Santa Fe.
Okay, that makes sense.
I don't usually appear in my paintings.
I also wondered about the columns. Why did you make the columns the way you did?
Because I was thinking about the Bima and thinking about Bernini's famous Bima with those twisted columns. Exactly. And then I was looking at pictures of temples since Bernini, and they all have these twisted columns.
Right. Yeah, I was just wondering if you were aware of that when you put it in there, but it's
absolutely
wonderful that you did. Yeah.
There's nothing in the painting that I haven't thought deeply about.
Okay, wonderful. It's beautiful.
After a process of really meditating on this piece was originally revolved around Parshat Achrei Mot, but so beautifully it was not finished, but in this iterative state, presented right on Yom Kippur when we read the passages of atonement, when we read the passages of Parshat Achrei Mot, and this idea of going from the Passover days when we were reading Achrei Mot in the context of salvation, entering it, allowing it to enter all the way through the other half of the year, when we involve our own introspective inner dialogues. It's very beautiful. Richard, we don't have time for another question, but we need to move on.
Can I say one more word, Dvir?
Sir, okay, one word, yes.
Okay. The question that he's asking is our sacrifice been enough yet? Or are they going to make us sacrifice more? That's the question.
And it wouldn't be a Jewish presentation without ending on a question. Ravi Sasker, you have the last word as we move into the next presentation.
No, incredible. I think just Jeffrey really has challenged me in ways that I still have not yet finished processing. I mean, just the powerful question that Jeffrey just ended with, which is a question that we all wonder about. Is it ever enough? Isn't that what Tevye asked Tilsa, right? You know, maybe choose someone else for a change. You know?
Yes.
I know what it chose, but can we take a break? You know?
Enough already.
Exactly. Very powerful. What is good. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Really, you taught me so much.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you. Our next presentation brings together Rav Baruch Taylor and Yona Verver. Yona Verver is a Dutch-born, New York-based artist, holds a master's degree in fine arts from the Royal Academy in Hague. She has shown and curated in galleries and museums nationally and internationally, such as the Andy Warhol Factory, Jerusalem Biennale, the Bronx Museum, Yeshiva University Museum, Bernard Heller Museum, and the Holocaust Memorial Center. Vera has been featured in the New York Times, the New Yorker, Ars Judaica, the Huffington Post. She is the founding director of the nonprofit Jewish Art Salon, and we have other significant members of the Jewish Art Salon here present. Rav Baruch Thaler grew up and received rabbinic ordination in the Hasidic Chabad Lubavitch world and has evolved into the wider world. He still keeps some connection to those roots in his own way, and he most identifies these days with the spirit of Jewish renewal. He spends a good part of the year organic farming and is currently heading the Nitzotzot community in Brooklyn, an egalitarian community of members who transitioned from their ultra-Orthodox Haredi backgrounds into the modern world, and who are now expressing their Judaism in new and creative ways. And one new and creative expression will be unpacked in this beautiful presentation with Yona Verver and Rav Baruch Thaler. Without further ado.
I was going to assume that Baruch was going to speak first, but I'm not sure if he's on the call, actually.
He's here. He's here.
Oh, okay. Oh, right. There you are.
Rav Baruch, you're muted.
Hey, okay. It says that the very first words, Bereshit, was also one of the 10 utterances, but it was said silently by Hashem. So, so we're beginning in the appropriate way. And thank you, Dvir, for bringing together this mamish, this such a creative Beit Midrash, and seeing you evolve and us working together in other ways too, and your personal life transforming. Mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, and to be following here after such illustrious people, especially Rabbi Saschar and Toby. And there's something very apropos of having a lapsed Lubavitcher follow a lapsed Satmar. It's Mashiach times, must say. Mavish,
Mashiach is on his way.
Right, Mashiach.
I neither one of you are lapsed. You are your own people. I don't believe in that. I'm sorry. Thank you for letting me speak, but I think you're both exceptional human beings, and
thank you.
I believe everyone is Tselem Elokim, so it doesn't matter what group you come from. I'll keep my mouth shut again.
Right, exactly. No, we're totally Hasidically egalitarian, right?
Exactly, modern Hasidish.
And right, and indeed, so much of the themes, if there is a recurrent theme going throughout here, just following the last couple hours here in room one, is that very notion that there is something deeper than the veneer that we're tapping into, and that is in fact the role of the artist to express and indeed peel away what seems like the monochromatic facade to truth and reality, and reveal it, like that famous Keats line, "Truth is beauty," etc. And in fact, even before we go to the parsha, we can see right here on the screen that that's in fact what Yona, with her amazing art, is doing here, peeling away the surface to show what is hidden beneath, which is in fact the Kabbalistic and Hasidic take on the Parsha Bechukotai, right? This is this end of Parsha Ki Tavo is where we get the whole litany of curses and all the fire and brimstone. If we're not good kindalach, that Tati up from above is going to patch us and put us back in line. And if we still don't listen, it'll be coming down even harsher and harsher. And really, it seems like almost like a horror film. Yet we read it every year, twice a year. So for a reason, and and going, discussing it with Yona, I mean, what we were revealing in our own process was, yes, indeed, in our personal lives, we encounter real calamities and real negative happenstances that can beat us down, and in fact, we can become they can become whole hindrances to our growth. And the teaching is of the Chukotai is that don't try to ignore them. Don't try to run away from all the, when the storm is coming our way. Yes, be protected and what have you, but there is a way that we can even harness the negative energy and catapult in a way that it can feed and bring out something beautiful therein. Just remembering that famous parable of the bucket with a hole in it, where the person's carrying, and why does this bucket need to have the holes versus the other bucket on the other side that's whole? Turns out that the holes with the bucket, the water drips down and it creates a whole line of flowers to blossom. So it's taking the vice and turning it into a beautiful creative expression. And many many artists we know have gone through great difficulties of life and have used the art process to transform it to something not just for personal therapy, but for that we can all share. And maybe that's why even us in the art of Torah learning, that's that too is a way of taking that which is on the other side and bringing it up, taking the tohu vavohu that we were just learning in Breshit and making it something of greatness. So I mean, the Hasidic interpretations there are details going into how the specific curses of the parsha translate into blessings. But you know what? How about Yona? If you could just continue. This is almost like playing telephone in a way. What is it? No, poetic corpse. What is it? Where one person begins. Exquisite corpse, right? So, yes, as we just saw before from Jeffrey, that art and Torah too is a never-ending process. So Yona, please, if you want to continue.
Yes, I'll take it from here, tag team. So first of all, Dvir and the entire Kahana team, thank you so much. And also you, Baruch, because this was just one section of things we discussed. We talked about everything under the sun. So really grateful for all the learning. So these two artworks here are based on blessings and curses mentioned in this Torah text. And these particular ones are focusing on rain. So rain, of course, is very important in Israel because it's a desert climate. And blessings and curses and rain are all open to interpretation. While good for one, they may be bad for another. So these paintings, the blessings, which is the one on the right, shows a section of the Judean desert that is fertile because of rainfall. And then the curses on the left show a pool of water with a dead tree branch sticking out. And this is where too much rain became detrimental. So it's not a coincidence that these two paintings at first glance are sort of interchangeable. They both have beautiful metallic surfaces. By the way, I created these by sculpting the canvases and covered in wet metallic Venetian plaster. They're each about 20 by 24 inches. And most people, if I don't tell them which one is which, they think that the one on the left must be the blessings because, there's so much gold and it's beautiful. Well, of course, the other one is actually the blessing. So how come? The blessings painting shows the process of opening ourselves up to Hashem. Like the blessings paintings on the right has a much wider opening, like we're beginning to open ourselves up. The cross kind of stands for us as well. And it also actually is reminiscent a little bit of a Torah scroll. And the more we open ourselves to divine energy coming down to us, the more we are open to positive interpretation of events. While the crust in the Curtis painting is more narrow, less open, and yet based on the surrounding gold, it also has the promise of becoming positive. I'm aware of the time, so I'm not sure if I should speak about it any further. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer. And if, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can you speak a little bit about working abstractly with ideas that, I don't know, that might be representational or could, I know that your work has worked both way, representational and abstract, but in these, they're very abstract. Can you talk about why you chose this?
Sure. They're less abstract actually than you think, David, because it's really hard to tell that the inside of the canvases has like representational imagery. It's like it kind of gets hidden by the crowd.
Yeah,
it does.
I want to say something, Yona. I have seen them, and David, when you see it on the screen, they look way more abstract. But when you see it up close, and I have to say, Yona, that's what I love about this piece of yours, because when you first see it, you think it's pure abstraction, and you get closer. And that's one of the things that I find very hard when you're on Zoom. You can't, Dvir, is there any way you can blow that up so that David and anyone else who wants to see it closer can? Because they're much more realistic than you think.
Wow.
Yeah, try the other one, Dvir. You can probably easier to see that. So pool, you know what? The right flap kind of covers it. You can, you have to kind of walk around it to see the whole thing. So you can really see easily when you look at it a little bit more from the left. I should have taken a photo a little bit more from the left. You can see it's a pool of water and there's this branch sticking out looking very forlorn.
Beautiful. How large are they?
But I am totally into it now. I'm working on a whole new series about Genesis for our upcoming Genesis exhibition in New York City, spring 2023, just throwing it out there. I'm doing a whole series about, opening and bursting through, etc. And it's so much fun because the other series I'm working on is totally representational. So I love the balance of the two series.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah.
And Yona, I just want to say that now when you see this one closer, what I like most about these pieces is that your colors are so diverse and you can read into them as if they're layers of metal. Do you know what I mean? They feel like they're patinaed.
Right. Thank you that you see that, Toby, because that really was what I was aiming for. Right. Yes. And I actually used like pewter and stuff to make the silver look aged, and went to did other things to make the gold look aged. But yes, it's all is actually metallic stuff. It has metallic pigments in it.
Yona, you should think about it. Your work is nothing like his, but it has a conversation with one of my close friends, Leonardo Drew, who had a big, he's shown all over the world, but he does these pieces of wood that he oxidizes, and they look like they're 100 years old. And this feels very ancient. And that to me is really exciting.
Great, thank you. I'll look him up, Toby. Thanks so much.
Thank you for this magnificent presentation. I feel like there's hours and hours of that we could expound upon each individual one, and in fact we have the hour-long articulation available on the website and on the Facebook page. But something that was particularly a connecting tissue between this piece and the next is trying to read a text at face value. Sometimes it seems very clear and evident that it's to be interpreted in one way. It's to be interpreted as a curse. And in this next presentation, Judith Joseph will describe to us how a curse can actually be seen as a blessing, and how we can really flip the narrative by allowing ourselves to dig into text. Judith Joseph, unfortunately, would like to be here, but wasn't able to attend. But she has sent along a statement that I will say in her honor as her shaliach. But before we get to that, I'd like to introduce both Judith Joseph and Rav Baruch Taylor. Judith Joseph is a Chicago-based artist whose work is exhibited internationally. She works across media, chiefly woodblock prints, painting, and installation. In addition to her contemporary work, she creates Hebrew calligraphic works specializing in the ketubah. Her work is inspired by nature, stories, and Jewish ideas. She is a published illustrator and is currently working on a children's picture book with her colleague, Dr. Jane Shapiro. She teaches artists Beit Midrash courses. And Rav Baruch Taylor, for those who weren't in the first session.
I think I'll just concur with Rabbi Saschar that we assume everyone was here.
Okay.
Just to modify, I'm not farming anymore since COVID the last couple of years, though I still have the farming cap. So
perhaps I'll start with her statement, just to go through the slides that she presented. And she walks us through her process in making this really intricate and magnificent piece. Parshat Metzora deals with how to purify a person who has a skin disease like leprosy. You have to separate them from the community. They go through some restorative rituals in order to be cured and made kind of kosher to be included in the group again. My thoughts about it had to do with the stigma of having a visible disease. It does isolate you. It's a cruel punishment, really, for the individual suffering with illness. Even we have illnesses that are invisible. We feel isolated and lonely and separate from the community. For me, the Amen Institute Chavruta and presentation coincided with the decline and death of my mother. Rather than withdraw from the residency, I decided to make a painting as an homage to my mother, who was deeply involved in and supportive of my art from earliest childhood on. This is my favorite picture of my mother and I from 1976. She was 50 and I was 20. As my Amen Institute articulation approached, my mother was entering her final days on this earth. She passed away at the age of 93, just a week before I was scheduled to present. This is a photo of my parents from 2018 at an exhibit of my work. My mother was a creative needlewoman. She loved color. In fact, she loved life. She created exquisitely crafted quilts, knitted afghans and sweaters and needlepoints. She had a talent for interior design and created a beautiful home. More than anything, she loved her family, which was her greatest creation. So I decided to use vivid color. I included Proverbs 31, Sefer Mishlei, the famous phrases about a woman of valor. The woman of valor phrases describe a woman who makes beautiful things with her hands, is energetic and dynamic. I laid my dying mother's image on the cushion of these comforting words. Above her are the white feathers and droplets of purifying blood, described in the Parsha, also the healing herbs. I drew her as she was. I wanted to look the mystery of death in the eye, as my mother was not one to sugarcoat things. I asked myself, what is the point of making art if it isn't true? I painted the truth of her death with tears streaming down my face. I shared the painting with my father and siblings before I showed it publicly, and they approved. Those are her statements.
Nice.
Wow, that's really intense. And it's just bringing me back to that period of time when we were collaborating. And And indeed, it was we felt process, and how apropos it was to be delving into this very parsha that's dealing with how we deal with this heaviness of the passing of life. My apologies. Yeah, and in fact, they were separate art pieces, as you noticed before. The Eshet Chayil was separate, and even like what's on the upper left areas of the whiteness, that was added later as Judith was going through her bereavement and Shiva process. She was adding more of this motion of release and purification, of taking the heaviness of death and beginning to celebrate her mother's life. And that is exactly what we discussed too. For example, in the process of the Kohen was to take a living bird, two birds. One was to be brought to death, yet the other bird was to be released for life. So that she's certainly captured here. And also the mixture of colors. There's the whiteness. There's the whiteness of the leper, her himself, taking blood, the under the skin, it becomes pale, or even a whiteness spot on the skin surface. So too, the Kohen symbolically takes both the Shnit Tolat, the red string, and the blood, and mixes it with Mayim Chayim, living water, transparent them, and does the purification process. So that again is a form of alchemy, taking that which is which carries all the polluted elements that we carry, and being able to release what we can and transform whatever we can too. And it mamish, there's this really resonated too with in my personal life also in certain ways where I've been going through difficulties, and just being with Judith at the same time, and being so it was also an emotional and chavrusa in a way, and it was a real opportunity to witness this process going through. And in fact, to connect it all to Parsha Bereshit, as Rabbi Yitzchak began, I saw an interesting gematria that the word Hamitzora, the leper, is the same gematria as the word Tohu, which is 411, meaning that it's and just like God also took from the chaos and created such a beautiful universe, so too we can take even the leprosy, that which is nega, nun gimel ayin, and just take the same material and just reassemble it and put the ayin at the beginning, and becomes oneg, bliss, pleasure, as the Sefer Yetzirah says. And that too is the work of the artist, of course, as we said before. And it also resonates with previous, Siona, I don't know if she's still on, with her art from Balotcha, where that was the take of the malady of Mitzora in a more gendered way, and she really beautifully expressed it that way. And that really resonated, especially with what's happening now in Iran with the women's protests, those that are constrained. They're not able to reveal their true selves, and going through that and being able to express who we really are. And that in a way is what the Mitzvah is doing too. And through the aid of the Kohen again being the agent of transformation and assisting that. And that's what the artist is too, in a way. Like we were talking before, that if the Beit HaMikdash is the beautiful museum, so immersive museum, So then the Kohens are the artists, of course, and the art is both hands-on, ritually, and even internally. Us all being able to take that impurity and transforming it into the holy. So thank you again for this amazing process, and hopefully we go on to next year, seeing this all in a whole new way, right?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Rav Baruch. And similarly to the magic that you just performed in front of our own eyes, where you brought back a conversation from four conversations ago, bringing Siona into the fore and bringing the voice of the Isha Kushit, where actually in your presentation, you came to a beautiful revelation where the healing mechanism for the Mitzora is through the Tzipor. And the healing mechanism perhaps for Miriam is also through Tzipora, that bring interweaving these conversations intertextually, and even in this own presentation that we have today, going back earlier, is exactly the magic that is about to be performed before your own eyes with Richard McBee and Rabbanit Aliza Sperling, where they weave the entire book of Sefer Bereshit. We just started it today, and yet we're about to finish it in the same day because of the incredible correspondence that Rabbanit Aliza and Richard had with one another, and the way that they really looked at the text with a deep and profound lens. Before we get to their presentation, I just want to introduce Rabbanit Aliza Sperling, teaches Talmud at the Maharat Yeshivat Chovevei Torah Beit Midrash program. She's also the director of Her Torah, an innovative women's Torah study and community program that brings women across the Jewish world together to learn from and with one another. Rabbanit Aliza received smicha from Yeshivat Maharat and a JD from NYU Law School. Richard McBee is a painter of biblical subject matter and writer on Jewish art. From 2000 until 2014, he wrote about the Jewish arts for the Jewish Press and continues to exhibit paintings, lecture, and curate Jewish art exhibitions. He is a founding member of the Jewish Art Salon. His essay, Contemporary Jewish Art, The Challenge, was published in the 2014 journal of Yeshivat Chovevei Torah. He has been cited in Matthew Bagel's Jewish Art in America and featured in full review of his Akedah paintings in Ars Judaica. His work is also featured Tradition and Transformation, 3 Millennia of Jewish Art and Architecture by Ori Soltis. His website, Richard McBee, exhibits over 300 of his artworks and 250 of his Jewish art reviews. Without further ado, Rabbanit Aliza Sperling and Richard McBee, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Devere. Let's see, I will get the speaker on. Good. Well, first of all, thank you and the Amen Institute for this tremendous presentation and for putting us all together, making a shidduch of so many artists and so many rabbinic voices. It needs to keep on going, really. Aliza emailed me earlier, texted me and said I should start, so that's the reason why I'm starting. This was quite an experience, to say the least. I just read her bio when we first saw some lists of the various rabbis, and I said, well, this woman looks interesting. It turned out that we were such a perfect fit because I've been working with these subjects probably, I don't know, probably well over 30 years, doing a lot of research. I wrote a paper on this subject in 2004 called The Rabbis and Uppity Women. And lo and behold, I found a rabbi opposite me here on Zoom who not only knew as much as I did, but also added to it, and really a similar view of really exploring these subjects, not taking them for granted, and really trying to open them up and questioning. So just to give you a quick idea of what this painting is about. This painting is called The Song of Eve. There's a subtitle, In the Merit of Righteous Women. And let's see, does my cursor work here? Yes, okay. So the painting is divided effectively into three sections. On the left-hand side, this is the story of Mrs. Potiphar and Joseph. Okay. On the right-hand side, this is the story of Tamar and Yehuda. In the middle, this is an echo of a very famous illumination from the Golden Haggadah of Miriam and the women singing at the sea. And behind them, there is Eve giving Adam the forbidden fruit, the fig. So we start with Mrs. Potiphar. Midrashic, and by the way, almost all of these things that I'm telling you that I'm interpreting here visually are very frequently found in very extensive midrashim all over the place. Anyway, the first one here is Mrs. Potiphar. She's having a dream. What is her dream? She dreams that somehow she will have a family with Joseph. Very unusual dream, prophetic dream, though. Wait till you see what happens. Now she sees him in this image. She sees him as a handsome young man, and she's taken with him. She's sexually aroused. She wants him. He comes into the house. He is, of course, her husband's best man around the house, and in fact, she tries to seduce him. And the midrashim go extensive midrashim where basically he almost succumbs. Almost totally succumbs. In fact, you see in this one, he's on top of her. She's just dying for this. And what does he see? He sees, as Elisa told me, he actually sees an image. First, one midrash says of his father, but Elisa found a midrash that says he saw an image of his mother. Again, the power of a woman in this relationship. Here's the classic down here, the classic scene of him trying to flee Mrs. Potiphar, in which she grabs his cloak. We all know that. That's simply from the text. Now, the next one down here is a little bit more difficult because, again, they have a midrash that tries to deal with what happens to Dinah's child. Dinah is raped. And she has, of course, almost with all sexual encounters in the Torah, there is a child. What happens to the child? The child is sent down to Egypt to get away from the brothers who want to kill the child because the evidence of the disgrace of their sister. And that child's name is Asnat, and Asnat ends up being adopted by Mr. and Mrs. Potiphar. So Asnat, it ends up being Joseph's wife. I'm going to very quickly go through this. Over here, this is finally the cross blessing in which essentially Asnat is overseeing, this is my midrash, is overseeing Jacob crossing his hands and choosing which son to bless, which will go forward. And standing here again is Mrs. Potiphar. Again, not in the text. This last scene over here is I'm blanking on it right now, is Pharaoh's daughter, Batya, daughter of God. Batya is jumping into the Nile to save Moses. We don't have time to go through all of these, but this is the story of Tamar, who effectively seduces her father-in-law when she's not allowed to marry his sons because of things that happened to previous husbands, and she seduces him on the roadside, gets pregnant, is about to be executed, and then she says, this is the staff of the man who made me pregnant. And she therefore has then twins. Those twins are the ancestors of David, King David Hamelech, and who of course becomes the progenitor of the Messiah. All of this is about the role of women in the Torah. All these midrashim are pushing towards to show that women have an extremely important role. In fact, I call them the engines of the Torah narratives. They drive the narratives forward. And just as here in the middle, we have Miriam and the women singing and echoing Moses' song at the sea, but their own song, so too they are taking a generative role as we come out of the sea and in towards Sinai. But where does it all start? It all starts with Eve. Eve has she's tricked, but she has the courage to actually go against what God said, take the fruit, and what happens? By feeding it to Adam and both of them eating it, they become self-conscious. This is the beginning of humanity. We are self-conscious human beings. in Eden, we were children. We were, or actually, my rabbi just said that we were like pets, God's pets in his garden. But we're not. We're human beings. And it's Eve that gave us that self-consciousness and that gave us the power to make these kinds of decisions, even sometimes in transgression. So I've spoken much too much. Lisa?
Thank you so much, Dvir, for putting us together. It really was an amazing collaboration with Richard. I enjoyed it so much. And really, as you could see, each one of these squares could have been a whole painting in terms of all the work that Richard did in terms of thinking about it and working on it. It was really a pleasure to work with you. The one thing that I want to mention is that as a teacher, this collaboration with Richard and also with Melanie was really interesting for me because you both kept telling me to think in images. And I don't think in images, I think in text, and the idea of thinking about something through the lens of an image was really new to me. And I was just thinking about that today. If you look at Richard's painting on the left, the second from the top, right, you see that for Joseph, it really all comes down to an image, right? He looks at the painting, not the painting, he looks at the image of either his father or his mother. Here we chose to say that it was his mother. There's a midrash that says that it was his mother whose image he saw. And that changes everything for him, right? It's the power of seeing that visual representation that impacted him in a way that all of his thoughts and theories couldn't have impacted him. And I guess that's something that I'm really taking from this collaboration, the power of image, and trying to think more about how to include it in my own teaching and my own thinking.
If I may interject, so I took this painting out maybe a month ago. Look at it. Okay, and I like the painting. This painting was painted in, I believe, 5 to 6 weeks. I do not paint that fast, but I had to do it because of our timetable. I looked at the painting. I said, you know what? Okay, I need to make this more. I need to make, as just you said, each one of these side images, I need to really develop them and really dig into the subject and make them more visually powerful. So what I'm doing now, actually, and the same thing with the center image. Okay, all of this was, quote, done standing on one foot. So what I'm doing now is I'm making a proposal for the Memorial Foundation for Jewish Culture, a proposal for a grant to take these paintings, turn them into 3 large paintings, in which all these subjects will be developed more, still in relationship to one another, but really try to get more out of them. And so that those images are stronger and you're able to see them clearer as also as individual images. So you're right. It's when you have to think in images. And like I say, when we painted this, as it were, I didn't think about doing another painting after it. Now I'm launching on a whole other project in which it will be 3 large paintings. Again, same format generally, but hopefully richer.
I guess I wonder, Richard, which one is your favorite image that you painted? Now that we've come back to it after a while, which one draws you in the most? Okay,
it was the last image I did, and that was of Eve giving Adam the fig. Many of these images are taken from previous paintings I've done over the last 30 years on these subjects. Like I said, I've done a lot of this work before, but that one of Eve giving the fig to Adam, I'd never done. And having to paint a fig tree and to put them in conjunction with one another, and also kind of situate them as a way in which there was a certain amount of modesty. It was I just simply had to do it. And I've never done it before. So in a way, there's something it's the crucial moment. And you know what? I honestly still don't understand it. It's very clearly in the Torah and the text of the Torah that this is a sin, this is a disobedience, and yet it leads to humanity, to self-conscious human beings who can, by the way, choose to serve God. So her giving this forbidden fruit to her husband, to Adam, and them both eating it. It's breaking through. So to me, that's kind of my favorite one.
Yeah, I think especially to us moderns or postmoderns or whatever you want to call us, that being able to see, to desire knowledge and then to act to take it is something that's really important to us, right?
Yes.
So I think that we see the story of Adam and Eve and we say, yeah, she was right. She was right. And I think maybe the question is, maybe she was right, but that gives us so much responsibility in terms of making the correct choices.
Right.
And the rest of your paintings really are all about those choices that people make when they have that knowledge.
Right. No, it's right. Almost in every painting there is a choice. That's correct. I'll give you an example. This one down here of David dancing. So this is when David's dancing. Who's watching him? Michal, his first wife, right? And she's watching him and she's disapproving of him. Well, but she's disapproving, but you have to look very closely. She's a very special person. She's not only Michal, she's wearing tefillin. Wait a minute, women wearing tefillin? Well, you know what? In the Gemara, it says, yes, she was one of the few women who put on tefillin and the rabbis approved. So it's like, again, this is pushing these boundaries that I find so exciting and should empower people.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for working with me, Richard, and thank you
for working with
putting
me.
us together.
Thank you. What I found most striking about this piece is that it changes the valence of the actions. That although we see these drivers of narrative as moments that we use the word sin, or moments that are seen as acts of disobedience, they become necessitated in driving the narrative forward, and they become these moments that actually, without them, we wouldn't have had seen anything come to fruition. And in this next presentation that we have between Melanie Siegel and Rabbanit Eliza Sperling, we see this as well as a moment where people act in disobedience, and disobedience from disobedience ends up equating itself back to virtue. But it's still in this moment of disobedience that allows us both a moment to ponder what it is that we're experiencing. And in that moment of reflection, we're able to really identify the true nature of an individual's character. So our next presentation will be with Rabbanit Eliza Sperling and Melanie Siegel. Melanie Siegel is Canadian-born, is a textile artist, educator, and exhibition coordinator. Her work in textile creation is innovative yet simplistic. Presently on several volunteer committees, Melanie is the co-chair of the museum committee at Baycrest, specializing in the installation in Asians. As an artist in residence, Ontario Arts Council education grant recipient for the York Region District School Board, has taught more than 700 students in felting workshops per school year and created permanent legacy projects. A graduate from the Ontario College of Art, Melanie has acquired many awards, published and exhibited in her works in Canada, USA, and abroad. Rabbanit Eliza Sperling, for those who weren't here at the beginning of the presentation.
Let's assume everybody was here.
Okay, if everyone is here, then we can begin the discussion on Parshat Shlach.
Wonderful. So Rabbi Sperling could begin and talk a little bit about the Parsha, as my image here is very full. But why don't you just give the little background of this?
Sure.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure, I'll get us started. Again, it was really a pleasure to work with Melanie. And it was a kind of art that I've never really gotten to know in depth before. Melanie works with fabric, and we talked a lot about Parshat Shlach, and specifically the story of the spies, the 12 scouts who go to the land of Israel. And there are 10 of them decide that they are going to come back and say bad things about the land, or about the capacity of the people to conquer the land. But 2 of them resist. And in our conversations, we focused a lot about what enabled those two spies, those two scouts, Joshua and Caleb, to resist when everybody else went along with the plan. And to me, it had special resonance because in this political time, you know, who goes along with the lies and who is able to resist is especially interesting. So we talked about Joshua, who is Moshe's apprentice, and you would expect that he would follow his master, right? It's no big revelation to say that Joshua resists. But Caleb as a resistor is really interesting because Caleb seems like one of the guys, but he finds the courage within himself to resist. Okay, Melanie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Right. So what I took from this was the conflict that these spies and these fellows had, and what they had to do in their lives to not accept what was given to them and make conflict and go into this land and look at this land and say, we're not sure, and we don't know if we're going to go there, and maybe we are. So I became very visual with this piece, and even though it doesn't really transpose, I have my pieces here. I don't know if this can show. So I became very visual and very tactile with my work. Here are the grapes. And I worked with not so much of the study of this, but for the actual movement, and the movement of making and creating was the highlight for me, to study and then to create in another form. It was a very difficult parsha, not the ones that I would have chosen or studied in the first place, but very, very interesting to take small ideas and put them into more of a depth. So the Caleb, he's just got a little bit in that picture. He's very large, and the other guys are much, much smaller, about the size of my hand. And I did all these pieces over the course of, it was conflict for me. My husband had COVID at the time and I moved out. So here I was in a room all by myself, and I had to make these guys. And so I had 100% focused time to work on them all at once. So as an artist, I like to create over a period of time, 3 months, 6 months, but we were studying about that. So the studying part was the reading and the learning. And then I quickly did these pieces. So they're a combination of vintage textiles and gold pieces. I don't know if this can show up better than on that picture, but they're gold and they're stitched and heavily formed and have a lot of, I made them so they have a lot of history. So they have a lot of stories in their clothing as if they were travelers. I thought, what if these guys were traveling? What would they be carrying? They'd be carrying tools. Some of them have little tools on them. They have little forks and knives, and they were traveling. They had to go to this faraway land and then come back and talk about it. So, so I speak as a visual artist, creating something out of nothing. That was really challenging and so interesting to me. So interesting. The piece, as you see it, is about 4 feet by 4 feet. I took it as a detail shot because it showed up a little bit better, but I don't think it transposes well on this screen, but it's quite arresting when it's all together on the wall. And maybe Rabbi Sperling, you'd like to talk a little bit more about their conflict that they had. That would be.
Yes, and I think, Dvir, if you move forward, I think there's a close-up.
Okay, the Torah mantle.
The next one after it? No? Okay, sorry. If we could go back then. Okay, wonderful. So the way that Melanie puts together fabrics and keeps adding certain pieces of the fabric is actually also reminiscent of the Torah portion, because we have Moshe taking Joshua's name, which was Hoshea, and then adding the Yud to the name, and then he becomes somebody different. And Rashi says the Yud stands for God's name, that God should be with you and save you from the conspiracies of the spies. And just that addition, I never really understood what does it mean to take a little Yud, right, and add it to a name, and that should change everything, right? But that's actually what Melanie does. That's her work. And Melanie, I wonder if you could describe for us a little bit, like what that means, what it means to take one piece of fabric or one embellishment, add it to something, and it becomes something else entirely.
Yes, I have this studying this textile technique over 30 years. I've developed a way of working with thread. And when I stitch these threads on there's this plastic that I have. And when you stitch on it and you put it under water, it dissolves. So all of a sudden there's a new fabric that occurs. So it's all made out of thread. And felt is another article that's made from wool of a sheep. And it's a process of wetting and drying and throwing it. And the process of making the felt, the processes of creating an old fabric or a raw fabric to a new way, it becomes transformed. That's what I really like about when I work with my textiles. It's not putting paint on top of a surface, it's actually integral into the piece. So each piece of felt is made from a wool of a sheep and washing and wetting and doing. And the stitching on the Torah mantle, if we look at the next picture, I have the Torah mantle with me here. This piece is all made out of silver thread. And the silver part is only thread. And the rest of it is all embellishments of pieces that I have and silks and all sorts of beautiful threads. And there's some jewelry on here. And this is it's hard to see on this picture, but this is the coastline of Israel. The front there is the Mediterranean, the blue, and then all the way around, it's the land, and it gets darker and brown as if it was going south into the mountains and to the desert. So the back is much more of the desert. The top of it is the land of Israel and the greenery up north. And so it became a whole project in this beautiful Torah mantle. And it's going into exhibition at Baycrest. It's going to be there for a period of 6 months. I'm very excited about that. I've added to it. I now have on this piece, I thought I should have the earth. So on the bottom are all the roots, and I have it. I'm working on that piece. So it's got a longer piece to it, and then it's got the roots, because I forgot about the roots. The roots are in Israel, and what happens to the whole life is the roots. And yes, Rena, I would love to see this on a Torah. I've done 2 Torah mantles, and they are on stands. And I've used one. Yes, there's the other one. This one is also made out of thread, and on it is the breastplate. I did a year study of the breastplate, of where all the stones are supposed to be located. Did my best shot at that. And then there's 52 pomegranates, and this piece has little bells on the bottoms, because I understand that the robes of the kings all had bells on the bottoms. So this piece has a little bit of noise and movement to it. I use this for my son's bar mitzvahs. My sons are almost 30. So the other oldest is going to be 35. So I used it at his bar mitzvah. It was only borrowed for that day. It's fully lined in silk, so it's functional, but it's mostly been on exhibition, and I am looking for a synagogue to purchase. It would be wonderful. It's a shame that it's unused, and it is functioning, but I had a synagogue tell me that they were afraid to use it because it was so delicate, but it's not. So I'm working on that one. I'm working on that. It needs a home. It needs a home. So any suggestions, please let me know. I mean, being in Canada, it's a little bit challenging it's been on exhibition to Montreal. It's been on the cover of magazines in the States, and here it is in my home. So it belongs on a Torah. It belongs on the story that it should unfold. So that's a little bit about what I do. It's all thread. And I like to have the integral part of making a textile. And then studying with Rabbi Sperling has been so interesting because she brought out some insights that I would not have thought of. And it was very challenging. It was very challenging.
Thank you, Melanie. It was really a pleasure to work with you. And I guess maybe for artists, this is kind of obvious, but for me, it wasn't. The way that adding different materials changes everything was kind of reflected in our piece that we read together. When does, coming together as a group, when does that keep you? You're just the same as you were, but you're a part of a group. And when does the fact that you're with someone else change how you think and change what you're going to do? Right. And that was a question for the 12 scouts, and 10 of them decided to conspire together and 2 of them decided to stand apart. And for me, learning with Melanie and with Richard, like just the bringing together these such different perspectives was so generative and really changed how I thought about things. So I really thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you both. And what's so powerful as well about how we bring the story of Shlach every year, we read the story of the scouts, their report, is that the rabbis teach us that upon every minyan, every single time that a group of individuals pray under a quorum, they invoke the voice of dissent. And all of these, they need to have a group of 10, just as there were 10 voices of dissent that brought out a negative report. And all of the voices of dissent and the voice of Yehoshua and the voice of Kalev, bringing all of those voices together, not allowing any voice to not be heard, is something that has been so core and center to all of these conversations, that we've allowed, that we've sought out and looked for opportunities to explore questions that otherwise maybe we wouldn't have felt comfortable asking, and pushing the boundaries and pushing our own selves to see the text in new ways. That is something that has been central to the prosperity and like the growth of each of these chavrutot, that it's all started and centered around the text itself being an opening and a propellant of whatever emerges on the other side. And what's emerged is nothing short of stunning, aesthetically gorgeous pieces that we've seen today, and also on a deeper level, stunning to the soul, and pieces that have allowed us to explore. I invite all of us to return to the main lobby as we share concluding words in this really beautiful capstone of a moment for this entire project. So please join us in the main lobby.
How do I do that? Okay.
You leave breakout room, but not leaving the place. This concludes our presentation. This concludes the color commentary virtual exhibit.
Drew, can you get out of the share so we can see each other?
Sure.
Oh, I can, yeah.
Thank you, because we don't need this anymore, right?
Right.
I need this.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for taking the afternoon or evenings or late evenings. Bria's coming from Israel, and people from all over the world, stretching from the West Coast to all corners of the world. This was called the color commentary because, like in a sports broadcast, you have the color commentary, which coats and comes in and interjects in different moments, and you have the play-by-play. And it's in these conversations where we're able to pull out and invoke deeper meaning, that we don't just go into our own modes of play-by-play, reading through the scripture and finding the same rote concepts that we lean on, but it's to try and shake ourselves up into a mode of color commentary, seeing the colors between the lines, seeing the letters dance off of the page, and allowing that to awaken and speak to our souls. This entire presentation could not have been done without hours and hours of beautiful and really pensive thought from each one of our artists, each one of the rabbis who have dedicated months of study into thinking about one parsha. When we think about the play-by-play, it's from one week, all of a sudden we wake up and we're at the next week, and we have to continually end up in a cyclical cycle of reading the next points. But by pausing and thinking for months about what are poignant thoughts that could emerge from one section, one sliver of the Torah, and then to allow that meditation to awaken artwork, to allow that meditation to create Divrei Torah, is something that for me has been nothing short of breathtaking to bear witness to. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all of the Amen Institute support team, to Bria Kahana, to Shalhevet Robinson, to Jacob Klein, to Kitra Kahana. Thank you, everyone who has put in hours and hours of work for making this all possible. Throughout the presentations, we also have some of the works that are for sale. You're able to find them at the ameninstitute.org/virtual exhibit. And if any of the pieces that are on for sale you'd like to purchase, we will get you directly in contact with the artists. And the applications are also open for the fellowship next year. They'll be closing at the beginning of December. So if you know anyone, any rabbi or any artist who's interested in partaking in this magnificent work, this beautiful project, please share it with them and let them know about what could be. Because everything that we've seen today is kind of looking backwards at what was. And last year at this time, it was still a moment in all of our minds of what could be. And thinking about everything that we've seen today, it's just really a breathtaking moment to say, wow, what could have been was but a dream, but what could be is continuing to engage in text from a creative lens. And it's been a really beautiful thing to bear witness to. So thank you all for taking the afternoon. Thank you all for sharing your beautiful thoughts, for being present with one another, for building this gorgeous community that's been the house virtually, and in some particular moments where we've been able to see each other in person.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Dvir, can we end off with a traditional chazak chazak for the siyum?
Yes, chazak chazak. Wow. Strengthen yourself, strengthens, and let us all be strengthened.
Amen. Amen. And Mazal Tov to Dvir.
Yeah.
Shalhevet.
Kol hakavod.
Shah tova.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Mazel tov.
Thank you.
This is so extraordinary. I feel like my mind and my heart exploding in like 17 directions I didn't know it could go in. This is so cool. I'm blessed to be here. And I thank you for the blessing of the art and the Torah fused with art and the art fused with Torah. It's so amazing. Wow.
Thank you. Thank you.
Especially for those of us for whom art touches our heart. And, songs do it, but art, oh God, it was wonderful. Thank you so much.
And Reb Barani, may you have a lot of Yiddish nachas from Dvir and the Home Mishpacha. Bis 120.
Kol tov. Take care, everyone. It's not goodbye, it's just au revoir.
Au revoir.
My mother would often say that, au revoir, but not goodbye.
Late thoughts.